Hello there, my name is Jaden Patrick, and today I will be providing a story of my childhood that I had to use as a learning experience. This story is likely to be considered sad by most, and for good reason. The title of my story today is A Lost Life Lesson. It is essentially a lesson that I had to learn by losing someone close to me in my life. I want to kind of start out with just some viewpoints of mine. Sometimes, the world has an interesting way of teaching us lessons. And, this can be as easy as learning something at school through a lecture, watching an informative video online, or, anything of that sort. But sometimes the world likes to throw something more serious at you, and it provides you a lesson in a way that you will never be able to forget in your lifetime, which is a perfect example of the reflection I have for you today. With this all being said, I just want to say now that this story is not me searching for pity or anything like that. I'm not looking for condolences or anything like that. It is just a very harsh lesson that I had to learn in a very extreme way. And with that being said, I want you to look at it the same way, as a lesson and not an insane tragedy, because others might view it as that. Let's begin for real. So growing up, my family situation was interesting, I would say. I lived with my dad, my mama, my papa, who are my grandparents. We lived in a trailer, and occasionally on weekends I would visit my mother. She was not with us. She was separated from my father. Eventually, she just completely faded out of the picture. She moved away, and I haven't seen her since I was about 3 years old. I'm 19 now, so that's 16 years or so. Eventually, I learned that's a good thing. That was for the best. It was for the best interest of me and her and my dad and everyone involved. It was a good thing looking back. I could probably do a reflection on that too, honestly, but that's not what this story is prepared around today. At some point, my dad began to date again, and he met this woman named Amanda. She lived around 30 minutes away and a couple towns over, and she was always really good to me. That wasn't exactly something I was used to because, I mean, I hadn't had a mother figure that actually stayed around and was loving and caring. So that was new for me, which was weird in a way, but also a good kind of weird for my young mind. For as long as I can remember Amanda, she was essentially playing the role of my mother figure. I can't really remember a time that I knew Amanda when she wasn't playing that role, if that makes sense. I was around 4 years old at this time, give or take, maybe a little older. I can't exactly remember when, but I know my dad proposed to her at some point, to which she said yes, and that commenced their engagement. They failed to actually plan a wedding as time wore on. Financial problems and lack of really interesting venues plagued any chances they had of really getting married. But me being 4 or 5 years old, I didn't care. I didn't know any difference. My life went on as normal. It didn't make any difference to me whether or not they were married. Amanda was still my mother figure, and I was really enjoying my new family. I got to meet new cousins that I got to play with around my age, one of which I'm still friends with to this day. And I was enjoying my entirely new side of the family. That's what it was to me. It was just a whole new side of the family that were my own blood, essentially, even though they technically weren't. That's what I consider them to be. But there's one thing that I seem to not really comprehend or understand. During all this, I seem to forget what was probably the most important thing of it all, and that was that Amanda was becoming my mother now. She was essentially my new mother. And I guess all the fun that I was having with my cousins, paired with my young mind not really understanding things, caused me to not comprehend that Amanda was my mother now, basically. I hate to use this reference because it sounds not great, but in my mind, she was just like another aunt or something. I still loved her a lot, I still loved her, but she would have been so much more to me if I just understood that she was taking on the role of my new mother. I will say, though, in my defense, I was really young, and nobody really took the time to explain the concept of a stepmother to me, and I couldn't have figured that out on my own. I was 4 or 5, 6 years old. There was no way I was figuring that out by myself without having any outside teachings of it. Despite that, though, I wish there was some way that I could have, realized and figured out that Amanda was now my mother. I did eventually, but by the time I did, it was far, far too late. At some point, we began to take really long road trips. There was the simple hour-long day trips that we took too, but these were different. The most notable one that I can recall was around 5 hours away in a completely different state, which was great for me. I love traveling. Like, my young mind was so satisfied with this. Like, I never questioned it. I just obliged. I went with them, asked where we were going, and I enjoyed the ride along the way. The 5 hour trip that I mentioned previously was to Duke University, actually, school that excels in medical fields, among others. But even me being as young as I was, the trip down there just seemed different than usual. Like, the vibes were off. Something was different about this trip. On this trip, it was me, my dad, Amanda's sister, and my mama, my grandmother. And the mood in the car was kind of like somber or sadness. Everybody was upset, it seemed like. But it mainly consisted of on the way down there, not really on the way back, from what I could tell. And, I wasn't told who was being evaluated at Duke. I wasn't told the results of who was being evaluated at Duke. I was kept completely in the dark, and for good reason. And like I said before, on the way back, everyone wasn't as upset, seemingly, as they were on the way down. But it still seemed like something was off, like they were hiding something. Again, I was really young, but I could still identify the fact that something was kind of being tiptoed around, if you will. But, I didn't give it a second thought. I just lived my life, and things continued as usual for a little bit. A couple months or so after this trip down to Duke, I was told that Amanda was checked into a hospital. This hospital was down in Kingsport, Tennessee, about an hour and a half away from where I reside in. And it wasn't made to seem like a big deal. My family kind of downplayed it, and I didn't pay much attention to it. People in my family were in the hospital all the time. Like, it was pretty normal. Somebody would get sick and they would go to the hospital and they would recover and it would all be fine. So that's kind of what I was expecting here too. That was until I was told that me and my grandmother were going to visit Amanda. My dad was with her every day and every night at the hospital from the day she got admitted. And I guess that should have been the first red flag to me. We got there to the hospital and I got to see Amanda, and I overheard a couple comments from her family that said that it was really surprising that she recognized who I was. She looked pale and pitiful, hooked up to all those machines. I guess most anybody would in that state. Most of all, out of anything though, she looked exhausted. Just so tired, like she had been awake for 2 days straight and needed a really, really long sleep. And a few days later, she would get just that, as she passed away from complications related to skin cancer. Now time has kind of ran its course, and things have gotten just more complicated since then. My new stepmother, who my dad's married to, has done things to me that I most likely will never, ever forgive. And some days I really fiend for those days as a naive child where I was incapable of comprehending just how good of a life it really was, looking back. It wasn't anything crazy, no lavish living, but we got through it together and we rode it out until the very, very end. And, I can't help but to be upset that nobody told me about Amanda having cancer, but, there was no way that I would tell my child that, given how severe it was. On the way to Duke, everybody knew that she had very little time, and that purpose of the trip was to get confirmation from one of the most prestigious medical schools that she essentially had no hope of living. And that trip all but confirmed just that. Looking back, I just wish that I could have understood that this was essentially my mother that was getting taken away from me again, and not had it dawn on me so many years later and overwhelm me with so much grief and guilt about a relationship that I just could not comprehend. If I can take away any sort of positive lesson from this, it would be to enjoy what you have while you have it. You never truly know what tomorrow brings, and you really never know what tomorrow might strip away from you either. And at the same time, you don't really know what's going on today either, if you really think about it. With all that being said, though, that is the end of my story. That is where I'm going to end things off today. Of course, thank you for watching. I do appreciate it. I hope you were able to get some sort of positive experience from this story. It's a traumatic story. It is, and I'm not going to lie about that and say that it's not. But also, I'm willing to share it so that maybe somebody else can experience less trauma due to the experience my story gives them. All that being said, thank you for watching. Have a good day or night, and I am out. Bye.